exactly how you're going to build the future that you want when there's so many ups and downs and twists and turns. So that's why looking at future trends can be helpful. Not to just say, oh, well, that's going to happen, or, that's what we're in for, but to know what we're trending towards so that you can think about ways it might benefit you. Also with the knowledge that these are trends, they aren't written in stone, and things can always change. So it is important to keep that in mind. So before we get into the future trends, we started talking last week about ways to de-stress, particularly at this time of year when there's a lot of holiday celebrations going on. It can get stressful. But, we are dealing with stress 24/7 all year round. And situations that cause stress are unavoidable. And what helps us is learning how to control reactions to this stress. Now, stress isn't all bad. I mean, we need stress in order to react to situations that might cause us trouble. But quite often, when we have this stress response, it's to things that are not equal to that kind of response. And it can become a chronic condition that can be triggered, very easily, and can cause mental and physical harm, as well as all kinds of diseases, from heart disease to stroke, depression of the immune system, which we talked about, insomnia, all of these things. So these are some ways to de-stress. Now, last time we talked about breathing exercises. Those are great ways of controlling anxiety, and almost immediately you can bring a sense of calm and strength to any situation by controlling your breath. And we talked about the 4-7-8 breathing exercise. That's breathing in for 4 counts, holding for 7, and then letting go of the breath for 8 counts. And doing that a couple of times can really bring down your stress level, blood pressure if you're having high blood pressure problems. So that's one way. If you can find a way to, walk away from a stressful situation or go into another room and do that, that can be very helpful. Another way to deal with stress is by journaling. Journaling gives you the chance to sort of organize your anxious thoughts and worries and get them all out there on the page, if you will. It can facilitate some problem solving and can just release negative thoughts. And journaling can work. Another aspect of that is because when we journal, we kind of want to put things into like an organized written form. But another way of approaching that is just to take a notebook or some paper or whatever and just write whatever comes into your mind, whatever you're feeling, whatever. It doesn't have to make sense at all. Just let it out. I mean, that's a way of really clearing. And then once that's cleared, you might have the presence of mind to then put together a journal of, ideas and things you're going through and all of that. So daily exercise is really a way of kind of dealing with that. Taking a walk in the woods is one of my favorite ways to kind of get away from negative thoughts or any kind of stress or anxiety I might be taking. So taking a media break or doing what I've talked about at the top of the show and what the show is all about, which is learning how to interact with the media in a way that minimizes any anxiety or overstimulation that that they can cause. You got to remember that these media, particularly the news media, these are businesses, and media businesses thrive on the numbers of people that watch, listen, or read them. That's how they are able to determine what they can charge for advertising, which is the mainstay of their income. Now that's changing, and we'll get into that in future trends too, about how that model of media creation is really already gone, but it's like hasn't been replaced yet. It's more like a zombie that just keeps lumbering along, but it clearly doesn't work anymore. The reason being is that it's almost impossible now to know who is watching what and for how long, and so on and so forth, because of the new media, because of things like streaming, and because of new ways that we have of watching television and watching movies, such as Netflix and Hulu and a lot of these other companies that are really changing the way that we interact with our media, as well as the ability to just watch things on cell phone and so on and so forth. So increasingly knowing how to deal with media, taking media breaks is great. I mean, certainly you can just walk away for a while, but of course you can't walk away forever. So I think it may be more helpful knowing that unless you're going to live on a mountaintop somewhere, you're going to have to interact with this media, is to be able to deal with it in a healthy way. And hopefully, I hope this show focuses you in some ways on how to do that. Okay, so caffeine can be a source of stress if you drink a lot of coffee or things like that, and it can overstimulate you. And if you're sort of an addicted coffee person, you might want to just gradually taper off, because if you go cold turkey, so to speak, it can cause, it actually is an addiction, because caffeine is a drug of sorts, and so you can have withdrawal symptoms. You can have things like headaches, and that will not be helpful to you in your desire to cut down on your caffeine. And then also just doing a little bit of cleanup, cleaning out the clutter, and making your home easier so that you don't have as much to do in maintaining your home as a source of stress. So those are some ways you can think about over the holidays to deal with stress. So now on to our big topic, which is the trends for the future. So here are some important overall trends, particularly in technology, that we're going to already are seeing. And one is the costs of technology and connectivity. In other words, our internet, our web connections, all of those things are going to continue, most experts say, to go down, to fall. And this is considered to be a 40-year trend in which technology costs will become cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, and will be more available to different communities. Solar cells, for instance, are continuing to fall and are becoming the cheapest source of electric power. And by 2030, it's expected that they will be making most other ways of power generation look like they're from the dark ages, if you will. Now, universal access to the mobile web. So again, and we talked about how making sure that every community, every person, no matter what their economic circumstances, has the ability to access the web. And so this will certainly be, this has been a focus of many state, local, national programs. So we're going to see a very, even more connected world. And by 2030, there will be the greatest and most explosive phase of digital expansion, according to a number of different futurists. There will be 1 billion children alive in the world. And never again in human history will so many children be growing up at the same time. The global population is expected to peak at about 11 billion by 2060. So these 1 billion children that are alive today, their views, their lifestyles, their needs, and in many cases we're talking about millennials, we talk about them, but even the children that are younger than they are, their ideas and lifestyles will dominate our planet. So teach your children well. So now we have emerging markets that will completely dominate our world. The United States and Europe have been global players for quite some time. Well, that's going to change over the next 10 years. So that by 2030, emerging markets in underdeveloped nations will really be the mainstay, and America and Europe will begin to decline as global players. And the voices and opinions and lifestyle choices of people living in these emerging markets will one day possibly dominate our entire world. And in these emerging markets are a lot of middle-class consumers in countries like China and India. They are already being transformed rapidly by this rise. Life expectancy is expected to grow as even the poorest nations are able to have better and more healthcare access. And we will be finding ways in which to slow down the aging process. Particularly people who have quite a bit of money to look into these things will be finding ways to do that. Global trade will be growing. Of course, we're seeing increased automation. Self-driving cars going to be already a thing, right? So also this trend that we have towards tribalism, which we're seeing in our part of the world. It reflects itself in our politics, but it also is a powerful force in communities throughout the world as a reaction to the globalization and the connectedness that we are experiencing. Local cultures, languages, and ways of life that begin to feel threatened may become more tribal in their approach. That can lead to activism in many forms, terrorism, These forces are, of course, fed by social media, and they'll undermine democracies